Well,
hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Adoptees podcast. So today I'm delighted to be joined by Steve. Steve, good afternoon. Welcome to the show, and thank you for making time for us today.
hey, it's an honor to talk to you today, Simon. I'm excited to always to engage in a deep dive over a discussion around adoption, and I couldn't be more thrilled to talk to our friends and family that are in the UK.
Great, thank you. It's great to have you here. We're what, about 5,000 miles away apart, or 12 inches on this Zoom screen. So, so thank you for making time for us today. Can you introduce yourself to the listeners, please, Steve?
Well, my name is Steve Sunday, just like the day. I've been a long-term adoption professional and an advocate since 1981, and so I've had lots of experience, most with private agencies over the years. And so I've been involved with expectant parents, with birth mothers who have chosen adoption, adoptees, and adoptive parents. And I certainly don't know everything there is about the topic. I'm still learning, and it's still a privilege to be involved in this work. I appreciate Simon and his voice can be heard across the pond, and so we're grateful to talk to him today. It's early in the morning here, but I'm sure it's late at night there.
Yeah, it's 3:30 in the afternoon here, and thank you for getting up early on a Monday morning. Yeah, when you say Steve Sunday, like the day, I think you might, well, Americans, we know that you love your ice cream, right? So, Sunday as in, like some ice cream with a chocolate stick in it or something. So my surname Ben, there's a kids cartoon series in the 70s called Mr. Ben. So it's about this guy who lives at, I think it's Acacia Avenue. It's a very straightforward British guy, and he goes to a fancy dress dress shop, and he actually puts on a new outfit, and then goes on an adventure that is in keeping. So he goes on into a jungle or something because he's got a jungle outfit on and finds a tiger and stuff like that. So I've had lots of gentle ribbing about Mr. Ben, and I'm guessing you've had some ribbing about Steve Sunday.
Well, a lot of folks have used that ice cream sundae commentary, but hey, somebody said to me, your name's Sunday, or is your name Sunday? And today, because it's a Monday, I think I'm going to celebrate with Monday.
Yeah, cool. So 40 odd years in this area. Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? We were talking before we hit the record button about, you were talking about how education has expanded. Education in the area of adoption has expanded across that time period, and I thought that would be a really great jumping off point, because there's so much, education, there's so much information out there. What's for our listeners who are either adult adoptees, but I guess we're focusing really today on adopted parents. For our listeners who have already adopted, what's the most valuable forms, or the valuable parts of the education as it stands these days from your perspective, Steve?
Well, I think one of the things that is at our fingertips that we didn't have 40 years ago was such ready access to the internet. Now we know that there's things and all kinds of things in the internet, and some are valuable and some are less valuable. But I know that in the old days, and when I say old days, I would say 30, 40 years ago, when things came to adoption, you were limited to the resources that were available to you in print. So you would buy a book on adoption, and certainly there were some great books about adoption to learn about the process, the emotions. There was lots of well-written books, and some of those are still very valuable today. But today there has been a flood of information to help all members of the adoption connection, adopted children, birth parents. There's so much more valuable information today than there has been in the past. A lot of it can be found on the internet. And of course, there's some resources that are maybe better than others. One place that comes to mind for me is the Texas Christian University, and I'm not sure exactly what town they're in Texas, but it's called TCU. Okay, so Texas Christian, and there was a woman who provided wonderful service to the profession and to the academic information that I think, in my mind, is one of the premier university involved in understanding the difficulties of children who were adopted are facing as far as making adjustments. And so I that's one place I think I would recommend. But what I'm saying is that there's so much at your fingertips that a person could delve into and learn if they desired to do so. And I would hope that anyone involved in the adoption journey, whether they're an adoptee or whether they're a expectant mother who placed many years ago, or an adoptive parent who's dealing with issues, that they would seek out competent resource material or competent therapists in adoption, because the academic base, the foundation of the base, I think has been broadened and strengthened with materials that are valuable for anybody to access today.
Yeah. So you talked about that being honored and still learning, and I feel that I'm still learning, and I know what I'm focused on, which is really actually about self-education. It's about my own emotional resilience. It's about my understanding of myself. It's pretty deep, so it's going further than my feelings. It's going further than my thoughts. It's right into the essence of who I really am. So that I use this phrase quite a lot. I use this quote quite a lot. There's a French philosopher that says that we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yeah.
And to simplify that down, the spiritual being is the I am. It's me. That's who I am. The human experience part is everything that I've been through, every thought and feeling that's been through my head or is going through my head. It's all the drama, it's all the trauma. So we say, you know, like, I am wounded, I am healing. We're focused on we're drawn into that drama of I am struggling, or I am in pain, or I'm going through a tough time. We focus all the time that we're focused on our experience. We're focused on the noise. It's noisy. It's noisy in our heads. We're focusing there on our noise rather than the piece of who we are, which is kind of underneath that noise. Does that make any sense to you?
Of course, Simon, and you know, and I think that's what makes life so interesting. Is there's so many of us here on this earth that have our experiences, our thoughts, and you know, and no one can discount that for an individual. The one thing I've learned, I think, is that sometimes we have common ground with others based on our experiences. You know, sometimes there'll be common ground with an adoptees, or sometimes there will be common ground with a parent who chose adoption. Sometimes will be common grounds with adoptive parents. But the one thing I've learned, I think, that has come with years, is in spite of the common ground we have, the experience is individual. You know, your experience up through adoption is unique to you. How you put it in order in your head, how you resolve things personally is really unique to you. You know, maybe people in less dire circumstances would not have handled things as good as somebody in a more difficult circumstance, because it's individual. And you talked about emotional resilience and stuff. So I think that one thing I've learned is, regardless of how much common ground there is, and sometimes we focus on that in a discussion, but I think we can't discount the individual factors. You know, last month we had a speaker, Camille Small, who talked about his experience with adoption through Korea and finding his birth mother. Okay. And wonderful experience. But I think what I would say probably about his experience is it has as much to say about him as an individual as it does about the nuts and bolts of his personal experience. It's how he chose to resolve things. It's how he chose to put them in order. It's how he chose to move forward in his life, and to move forward in such a positive way that what he does today is help other adoptees who experience similar things to address issues related to their experience. And so I think that there's some real value in not only understanding the experience of others, but seeing it through the prism of our own eyes, and understanding that that may not apply to everybody, but it may apply to some. So I really do admire your determination, Simon, to give back, you know, to help others in a situation better understand their situation by what you've learned about yourself. So I think that that is a great contribution that you can make through your podcast and through your efforts.
Thank you. Thank you. I think for me, there's three strands there. There's the education, the research piece. You know, there's the that you've drawn attention to this Texas Christian University. So there's all those sources. There's the lived experience of others, and then there's the individual path that we're all on. And for me, that is the crux of the matter. So that's the kind of like the self-education piece. It's drawing from good sources, good academic sources, other people's lived experience, and bringing that into a melting pot inside our own heads, and figuring it out ourselves. And that requires some reflection. And I know that I can be quite impatient, right? So creating time for the reflection, or reflecting on things, like we're spending, me too, right? I spend a lot of time firefighting, so there's less time for reflection. We're not creating enough space for reflection to integrate everything that we've learned. We're kind of like grasping at straws. Are we grasping at straws? We're looking, what's going to solve this today? What's going to, that's kind of my take on where we are as a culture. And I'm talking about the UK and the US here, really.
Yeah, at least the thought that came to my mind, Simon, when you were talking, is it's kind of like a bar stool. A bar stool has 3 legs. And if we did put a leg on those things, as far as education, support, and then the individual, if one of those things are missing, then most people that have ever sat on a bar stool know a 2-legged bar stool doesn't work very well. And so I think that all those things are important. A person's individual resolve, their individual understanding and perception and identity and their emotional reserves, all those things that they have in their life that give them a solid position to go through life with. Versus, and of course, in the adoption scenario, we've said maybe education is a component, okay, and maybe support is a component. Maybe the support is professional help from an adoption competent therapist. Maybe the support is educational information and support from an agency, whether it be government or private, that is helping an individual through their adoption process. But when you match all 3 of those together, then you have stability at some level. You know what? One leg might be longer than the other, and that makes it a little bit more difficult. But sometimes it's that refining process that kind of smooths it out so we get balance in our life.
Yeah, great metaphor. You used the word resolve, which leapt out at me from that. What do you mean by it?
I think in my mind, and again, this is just me speaking, the resolve piece, to me, is kind of saying, this is my life. This is my life. This is my, this is who I am. I'm a Korean American adoptee. I am a birth mother by choice. And now what am I going to do with that? That it's going to take me forward in positive ways. Okay. So to me, I think it's that resolve that says, regardless of my beginnings, what is my present and what is my future? And again, Simon, we've only talked in this fashion, so I don't know you a great deal, but I think at some point you resolved your life situation in such a way that you chose to do something in your present. You chose to do something in your present, and your ideal is that not only you're doing it in the present, but you want to do it in the future. And what you've chosen is something that you see that brings value to yourself and brings value to others. And so regardless of your life circumstances, you've resolved to move forward in a very positive way. And whether or not you're a biological child or an adopted child, that's a journey for everybody.
Yeah. I think, it's, so what next, isn't it? Resolve is, this is where I'm at, but
well, yesterday's news doesn't mean as much as today and tomorrow's, and we talked about an article that you had seen recently. Again, right now it's already old news. So the question is, what can be done different? And I think that's what you're talking about. What can be done to help in situations like these that moves us farther ahead with resolve?
Yeah. So I see the metaphor that comes to my mind, and I have used before on the podcast. I'm a lover, not a fighter, right? I'm not a military man, but apparently your Marines, right? They run towards the gunfire.
Yeah.
So that's according to them. See, because there's a lot of competition we have this in the UK as well. The competition between the different regiments, and they identify with their regiment, and whether they are Army or Air Force or Navy, and then like it's a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
They run towards the gunfire, so they want to resolve stuff. To use your resolve word, which I think is an excellent one, and I think that anybody listening to the podcast, this podcast in general, and this one that we're talking about now, is showing a degree of resolution, because they are not. They're listening to be educated. I'm guessing. I mean, that's why I listen to podcasts. I listen to be educated. I listen for new ideas. I listen for a deeper understanding of myself. I listen for a deeper understanding of strategies. I'm listening. I'm up for new stuff. I'm curious, and that's so. But I'm gonna do something with it. Mm-hmm. So like I saw this article that we referred to earlier on, and it's like, and it knocked me. I'm not going to go into it because we don't want to. I think what I learned as we were talking, I was talking about it in quite animated terms before we started recording, and you said something word about judgment, and I was thinking, yeah, actually, Simon, you're judging this adopted mum. You're judging this adopted mum in this article, and so that for me is a little glimmer. Okay, there's a little piece of where Simon needs to improve there, right? So I'm resolved to improve. I'm drawing on I'm drawing on an article, my reaction to the article, and my reaction to your reaction of what I've talked about in the article. So I'm resolved to hopefully be a better person, to hopefully seek to understand. I mean, it's Stephen, that was one of the first kind of self-help books I read. Yeah, have you heard of that book? There's 7 Principles of Highly Effective People or something
by
like
Stephen R. Covey.
Stephen Covey.
Stephen R. Covey.
Seek first to understand, I think, is the second one. I read that maybe 25 years ago. It had quite a profound effect on me. but see, 25 years on, and I'm still learning. I'm all still learning. This isn't just like this lifelong learning thing. Isn't just a bumper sticker. It's like, we're resolved in that.
Well, I'm trying to think of the thought I had when you were talking, but I do think it's a journey for us. You know, I don't know about the UK, but I think one of the things we're learning in the US is that we can't take everything that we read in the paper or see on the news as exactly the most accurate of information. And so I think always, as you've already just counseled us, is the idea of sometimes we think we get all the facts. And as a social worker myself, sometimes you don't know the facts until you delve into the deep information about a family. So it's really hard to judge an adoptive parent based on information in a newspaper account. It's really hard to judge any person relative to that. And since we're talking about adoption, it's hard to judge anyone involved in this institution because there's so many factors. There's so many factors involved. And then you have the individual dynamics of that individual that contribute to it. So I think the highest level we can get at is how can we look at the institution of adoption and what happens from a level of let us provide support, education to help people through their journey. That education, we have a saying here in the US that you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And sometimes that's very true in this business too. Yeah.
Well, I guess they're already drinking if they're listening to the podcast. So good on you, listeners. The resolve, I think it's the resolve thing. It reminds me of a conversation that I had earlier on a couple of weeks ago, and it was, somebody summed it up as, like, I'm their dad or I'm their mom, no matter what. No matter what. So there was there's that sort of resolve as well. I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna make it work. I'm gonna make it better. I'm gonna keep on learning. I'm not gonna dwell on the past, because as you say, the past, we say it's did you ever have fish and chips when you came to the UK?
I was in Australia for 2 years and England for a little bit, and so fish and chips. If you didn't have newspaper print on your fish, then it wasn't legitimate.
Okay, well, so today's news is tomorrow's fish and chip wrapping paper, fish and chip wrapper. But these days, you'll be upset to hear that because of health and safety or whatever, they don't do that anymore. I understand. It doesn't. But yeah, and we say here, there's no point crying over spilt milk. Like living in the past. I mean, that when you're talking about resolve, you're talking about future. So that's what's happened. What are we gonna be doing about it? Being future facing. And there's a lot in the media. There's a lot of speculation, and there's a lot of looking back, and a lot of blame, and a lot of and where's it going to get us? Where is that looking back going to get us? One of my favorite sayings on this is that the past is a place of reference, not a place of residence. So how are we going to move on?
I think, Simon, that says it all right there. Sometimes we have to go back to the past to try to understand it, but it seems like the challenge for most people is how do we make it a stopover and not a residence, like you've indicated. How do we resolve those issues to the point where we can resolve them and move forward versus going back there and living in that past, where that trauma that happened 20 years ago is the same trauma that I experience today. That's the sad part, I think, is when we allow that trauma 20 years ago to affect us today. And so I think, to me, if you're a self-change agent, if you're an agent of self-change, and then you have the power within to change your circumstance now and not be a victim over and over again. You know, it's one thing to be victimized by somebody in the past, but to be a victim today means I'm allowing that to happen to me today. And again, that is a hard journey. That is not, I mean, we can tritely say that today, but that is not an easy journey. And usually people need help to get there. But again, that's what we're talking about, the support to reach out and get the help that you might need.
Yeah. So one of the most meaningful helpers in my life, a couple actually, Liz and Richard, what they shared with me is that, you know, if we are there's this choice thing, you know, the self-change agent, as you talked about. If we're, this is so simple that it took me ages to get it right. Most of the time, most of us aren't choosing how we feel. And if we're not choosing, it's not our fault. So I'll say that again. Most of us aren't choosing how we feel most of the time. And if we're not choosing, it's not our fault. It's like we can, because what I used to do is beat myself up for feeling down. And there's an incredible freedom that comes with not beating yourself up anymore, or beating yourself up less. I mean,
yeah. You know, I think it's complicated when you talk about, you know, like self-inflicted pain kind of things. You know, it's kind of like, I mean, I think we do that a lot of times with ourselves, is where we beat ourselves up. You know, some of those, and one of the things I think comes with age and life experiences is to be able to sort those things out, hopefully, is to be able to sort those things out so we can move forward in such a way that we still have those demons or little boxes of little things that didn't go so well in our lives, but somehow we can put them in a proper place where you don't have to dust them off every day.
Yeah.
You know, you can leave them you know, in a spot that is, you know, it's stored there. I mean, I don't know that we ever forget anything, but we need to be able to move forward. And some of these things are very traumatic, and some of these things are things that people cannot get through without coaches, like you said, or people who kind of mentored you through these times. And I think that, I guess one point I would like to leave is, regardless of whether or not you're adopted or whether or not you weren't adopted and you were raised with your biological parents, and regardless of that, we're all dealing with some of the same kinds of issues. I don't think we can lay this at the feet of the institution of adoption. There are a lot of kids struggling with their childhood, regardless of what the institution was, whether it was with their biological parents or not. I can't tell you how many times in therapy over the years working with folks, of people struggling with their childhood and the things they learned and the impressions and that they adopted in their life that became a part of their emotion, but adoption wasn't a factor. So to allude that somehow that this is just because of adoption, I think is too far of a stretch.
Yeah. Wow. There's two very different places that I could go to from that, as you were discussing. My first question is, how do you see adoptive parents beating themselves up? Or what do you see adoptive parents beating themselves up for?
I think adoptive parents, I think the very first thing that they experience is how do they resolve their own issues around infertility and their inability to bring children into the world biologically. So I think there is so much. I mean, one of the big challenge with adoptive couples and adoptive agencies is helping couples resolve their own physical inability to have children. Now, most of us don't have any kind of perception of that. However, that is a huge psychological barrier for them to resolve. Something that I've dreamed about my whole life, something that I saw as natural and automatic.
Yeah.
That when I got married or whatever, we could not bring children here. So that's one of the first things that they're dealing with. And that's lost. They have to mourn that loss. And in order to move forward and to be grounded adoptive parents, they have to be to the point where they have resolved that grief. So that's one thing. And then I think another thing is there's a lot of adoptive parents feel like they're scrutinized, where they are, not only are they scrutinized around infertility. Now, I don't know if you've talked to very many people going through infertility treatments, but if you can imagine the scrutiny that goes along with, something you thought was going to be so natural and easy. Now you go through that scrutiny, and now you have to go to a public government or private agency, and you have somebody asking you about marriage. You have people asking you about your childhood, about your family of origin. You're going through this extensive screening process where and I'll hear some of them say, but it's so easy for a 15-year-old or a 16-year-old to get pregnant, but I have to go through tons of screening to even get into the door. And that's even before somebody might pick or select us for a child. So anyway, if you're talking about adoptive parents, they're going through issues around infertility. They're going through issues of being screened. And then they're going through emotional dynamics that says, will I be able to attach or bond to this child? That's not my child biologically. Okay. So there's so much, I think, that adoptive parents are faced with. I mean, if you take each member of the adoption triad, if you want to call it that, each one is facing issues that, again, require education and support. Because sometimes adoptive couples don't even know that those are factors that are contributing to their emotional stability in this matter. And again, it's, as professionals, it's our responsibility to help them address issues that they can't see themselves.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, the famous blind spots. Did an episode with a lady called Erica Schmidt on the impact of infertility a few weeks ago. So I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that. So that's definitely worth checking out. Scrutinized and emotional dynamics will I attach. All great stuff. The other thing that came to me was you were talking about biological kids suffering like adoptive kids. So as far as I can tell, this is my personal experience, right? The mind is a meaning-making machine. So it's looking for links, it's looking for connections.
Yeah.
And once it gets fixated, it's fixated with, what we focus on gets bigger. So and it gets I was thinking about this yesterday, and a metaphor for it, and it's a strange one popped into my head. I was thinking about like a magnifying glass, right? So when we were kids, we used to mess around with magnifying glasses, and you'd get the sun. You'd go outside getting the sun, and you could set a fire going by focusing the heat of the sun. And we used to mess around like that. I don't know whether kids still mess around like that, but that's how the mind works. It's a meaning-making machine. And once it's set in its ways, once it's decided, once we have what people call a limiting belief, then we can get a bit set in our ways, right? And one of the things that I see, or one of the things that I did, and I have done a lot, is I have fixated on stuff. And that's one of the reasons I listen to podcasts, is to make my unconscious beliefs, bring them out into the light of day, where we can see them, and we can see them for what they are. Beliefs that we can then maybe let go of. And I see this in adoptee groups on Facebook. I see everything blamed on adoption. There is a common phrase, there's a common theme. I'm adopted, I suffer X. Does anybody else suffer? Whatever it is. And it's everything in their lives. It's the reasons, the things that adoption gets pinned on are unbelievable and unbelievably broad. And what happens is that the rest of the people in that group, they all jump in and say, yes, I've had that problem too. And so the belief gets stronger. It is validated. Now, I mentioned my coaches. I've had coaches and mentors, and continue to have them, and continue to go, like online courses, learning from people. A coach will question those limiting beliefs. In certain groups, nobody will question them, and if nobody will question you, nobody will question you, and the false belief is reinforced and taken closer and closer to heart. Most of the stuff, some stuff is adoption related, some stuff isn't. Some stuff is adoption and some stuff is human. Most of it, I think, is human. Well, I think all of it's human, actually. But nobody's going to believe me on that, so I'm hedging my bets just to.
Yeah.
But we get, and I've done it, right? So I'm talking from. I'm not saying that I'm any better at this than anybody else. I pinned the tail. I pinned tail on the adoption donkey way too much. And I see this. I see this in adoptees. To what extent, you know? What about adopted parents? Do they get a bit? Can they tend to get a bit fixated on stuff and pin the tail on the wrong donkey?
You know, I have several thoughts, Simon, based on what you just said. First of all, I just admire your wisdom. And to me, wisdom is it's life experience and then sorted through our heads and coming out to some balance that really works and seems grounded, so that it's solid, that you can stand on. You know, one of the things, your analogy with the magnifying glass, I think that what happens a lot too, you know, that we zero in on our paradigm that's kind of guiding us. And sometimes we need that paradigm, or we think we need that paradigm in order to move forward. It gives me purpose and meaning in life if I can be hurt and bruised and notice for my pain and the difficulties I face. I think if you take that online group and you take out the word adoption and all aspects if you take out the word adoption and you throw that out in cyberspace and say, I was hurt, I was bruised, I was emotionally empty. Is there anybody experiencing the same thing that I'm experiencing? And all of a sudden you're going to expand that group 1,000-fold, because there are so many of those. And you know what? Most people would probably interpret that those experiences that they had that were bad in childhood, they would contribute it to their biological parents. Okay. Again, I mean, if you throw out the word abused, you're going to get all kinds of things. Yeah, sometimes adoption will come in there, but most of the times it'll be situations that had nothing to do with adoption. The one thing that I'd have to say on groups, if a person is looking to participate in the group, that sometimes the very best kinds of groups are usually two things are attributed to it. One, it's run by a professional. Okay. Because the others, I think, are just, hey, I want to validate my experience with others that had the same experience. A professional group is a group that says, what's the purpose of this group? Is the purpose of the group to move me further along in a healthy way? A professional brings balance to that group. A coach, a mentor, somebody that brings balanced perspective. Okay, because this happened to me, does that mean that everybody that was adopted had this experience? Or does that mean that people have had this experience that weren't adopted? There can be all kinds of balance. So a professional brings balance to it. The other thing that I think that is important in a professional group is that they're usually time limited, okay? But when you're hurt, I've seen a lot of groups go on for 2-3 hours, where people are going all through the night, focusing on that one thing. And when you see that all through the night, you wake up and that's what you see again, And so to me, the importance of groups and support groups and those kinds of things is outcome. What's the outcome that we want? Do we just want to commiserate with somebody that has had the same experience? Or do we want to understand it? And do we want to move through it? Do we want to move to something on the other end? Or is this going to be our lot for the next 40 years? And I tell you, from my experience, that would not be a happy position to be in.
No. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's we really need to be discriminating. I think that's a very clear. I think you've given a very clear way of that people can discriminate when they look, establish for themselves whether it's the right group for them. So, what is the purpose of the group? And maybe we should be asking, if that's not clear, we should be asking. And also, there's a difference between theory and practice. So one, so I'm gonna, I've started so I finish, as they say. That's mastermind. That's what they say at the end of the mastermind TV program. At the end of a round of the questions, I've seen people in the I've seen people in the adoption world who are still very much struggling, and haven't seen any light yet, and yet they're putting themselves forward in leadership roles. Now this scares me. I find this really scary. So, and I was trying to think, well, what makes you different, Simon? Well, on this, why you're running this podcast. What right have you got to do that? And I've seen the dark and the light, and I know the difference. And a lot of these people that I've seen, the ones that I'm concerned about, don't know the difference between the two. They don't think, they're still at a stage where they haven't healed sufficiently to know when the old programming is running for them or not. They don't have they're not able to discriminate between the voice in the head. They still believe in the voice in the head. They can't. So we need on a more, and I've seen this in other, like you said, I've seen this in other groups as well. So one was a supposed leader in healthy eating who was about 8 stone overweight. Now, I don't know where we get this from. We have this word fat shaming. I don't know where that's come from. I'm not fat shaming this person. I'm just saying that somebody who is 8 stone overweight shouldn't be in leadership, shouldn't be in a leader. It shouldn't be positioning herself as a leader in the healthy eating. And it was school dinner space. And then there's another one on mental health. We had a mental health advisor, government advisor, who was off with stress. Now, I want to follow somebody that's ahead of me on the journey, not somebody that's behind on me on the journey. And we have to be very discriminating about who we take our advice from, and because I don't want to follow somebody that is lacking in integrity. Where there's not an integrity between what they say and what they do.
I think again, Simon, you're right on. I mean, you want to be connected to folks that can lift you up. And we're all on a difficult journey. So sometimes even the physician needs assistance. Sometimes the person who promotes healing needs healing, and so sometimes we're pulling somebody up, and sometimes somebody else is pulling us up. And so it is life's journey. I think, as you talked about it, this spiritual journey is one of lifting and being lifted up. And again, obviously, when you want to be lifted up and you put your hand to be lifted up, you want somebody who's in a stable position, stable preparation, whatever it may be, academic, educational, whatever preparation that they've had. They need, you need to put your hand out to somebody that can grasp it, that's prepared and ready and capable of providing that. And the other thing I think I'd say is that when we talk about light, I think that sometimes there's different shades of things. Sometimes things are really dark. Sometimes things are less dark. Sometimes things are bright light, and you're just feeling great. And then sometimes it's a darker shade of light. And so to me, really, I think the journey is about, one, we're not alone, but when we feel like alone, I think it's best to reach out to those that, again, are grounded, that can help us. Rarely do we ever get lifted by going into a situation that is darker.
Indeed. I'm conscious of time, and that sounds like a really great spot to draw us into a close, Steve, unless there are any
no, again, Simon, just appreciate what you're doing there in the UK, and we're it's a privilege to get to know you. The only sad part, I think, is that I won't, I probably won't ever get to meet you in person, but I think that would be a wonderful blessing to be able to do that. Appreciate your good work and keep it up. I know it's not always easy, and the journey is not easy for any of us, but I do appreciate the opportunity to visit. And my real hope is that not only that you and I have had a good conversation, is that somehow we might have helped somebody else in the audience to kind of seek a direction that would bless their lives. So again, thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I'm going to put some links into Steve's website and the socials in the show notes. I do that for every. I don't always mention it on every episode, but I always do that on every episode. So check out what Steve's doing, connect to him on the social, because this is about support, and this is about helping one another, lifting one another up when we're struggling. So thanks, Steve. It's been an honor and a privilege to chat with you again. And,
great to talk to you today, Simon, and keep up the good work.
Thanks.
We'll see you later.
Thank you, listeners.
Bye-bye.